Good evening and welcome. My name is Mia Freedman. I am the co-founder of the Mamma Mia Women's Media Company, and coincidentally, and I tell you that because I was invited to MC this before anyone knew the connection. You might have noticed if you've seen your program, there are a lot of Freedmans on the program. I am the proud cousin and niece of two of our speakers tonight, and by extension, I feel very much part of the endo community. We've got a really interesting evening ahead. We should be finishing up in just over an hour, but we have some incredible speakers and we're going to have a panel at the end as well. To start with, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather and meet and pay our respects to elders past and present. On behalf of Brandon Wainwright, Director of the University of Queensland's Institute for Molecular Bioscience, I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight at this very special community event, EndoWhat, Unravelling the Mystery Behind Endometriosis. Now, before we begin, just a few housekeeping matters. Tonight's event will start off with each of our presenters talking to you about endometriosis from the perspectives of a clinician, researcher, and patient advocates, as well as someone who suffers from endometriosis herself. We'll move into a panel discussion afterwards where we'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. We've been overwhelmed by your interest and support for tonight's event, so it's sure to be a great conversation, and I hope you'll help us continue it beyond tonight. For the comfort of other guests, please turn your mobile devices to silent, but do not switch them off. Keep them handy because we encourage you to tweet your comments and questions during the event using the hashtag endo or by tagging at imb.uq. Please be aware that we are video recording this event so we can share tonight's proceedings with any guests who couldn't make it. And if you need to go to the loo during the event or leave the auditorium for any other reason, please can you exit via the back? There are doors up the back and there are bathrooms up that way, rather than at the front, which we'll sort of save for the end so we don't disrupt the concentration of the presenters. Toilets are located on this level and fire exits are located on each side of the stage and through the rear door of the auditorium. Always wanted to do that. Oxygen masks will drop from the ceiling. In the event of an emergency, please put your head between your legs. No. The assembly point is in front of the Queensland Art Gallery on the riverside near Victoria Bridge. If you don't know where that is, ask someone. Fire wardens will direct you to the assembly point once you have exited the building. So if you do need to leave straight away, in all seriousness, go through this door. And please remember that the State Library of Queensland is a non-smoking venue. So if you're planning to just light up during the course of this evening, please don't. Tonight's event is hosted by UQ's Institute for Molecular Bioscience, or IMB. IMB is a leading multidisciplinary life sciences research institute that is home to almost 500 scientists, postgraduate students, and support staff. IMB scientists make and translate discoveries in many areas, including endometriosis, cancer, pain, superbugs, inflammation, heart disease, and solar biotechnology. I am very excited to be here because at Mamma Mia we are very pro-science. Tonight, we're here to talk about endometriosis. And as a supporter of women whose lives are affected by endometriosis, and indeed a relative of one, I'm thrilled to see this room filled with so many of you who are keen to learn more about this often very debilitating health condition that affects 1 in 10 women worldwide. Now, as I said, Syl Freedman is my cousin, and Lesley Freedman, who are both the founders of EndoActive, is my aunt. But long before they founded EndoActive, I was Syl's boss in a kind of a way. So she was at uni and she was interning at Mamma Mia. So she came in 1 day a week and it was usually a Monday. And she would come in and she was really good and she was a really great writer and a really hard worker until she kind of wasn't. And I remember saying to my mum, look, Mum's like, oh, how's Syl going at work? And I was like, look, it's really a bit awkward because she kind of just keeps calling in sick. And like, I know she's young and whatever, and it's an internship and it's not a proper job, but like, it's a bit awkward because, everyone knows she's my cousin, and then she just sort of doesn't come in on Mondays, or she comes and then she has to leave. And I'm just finding her really unreliable. And I feel like maybe she's just not that into it and she doesn't know how to tell me. And so we sort of talked about it, and we sort of had a whinge about how unreliable millennials could be. And that's what I put it down to, because why blame anything else when you can just blame millennials? But I later found out that Syl was really suffering. And at that stage, she didn't even know that she had endometriosis. She had a whole bunch of symptoms, and I won't speak for her, but she had a whole bunch of different symptoms that were incredibly debilitating and really causing her to miss work, to have to leave halfway through the day. And she knew how bad it looked. She was embarrassed, she was mortified, but she didn't have a name for it, and she had no sort of term for all these different things she was experiencing. And it was really, really instructive, I think, for both of us in terms of what so many women with endo struggle with in the workplace, and how, you couldn't get a more female supportive work environment than Mamma Mia. We have now over 100 staff, 99% of whom are women. We have free tampons in the bathroom. We are all there for the ladies. And if I didn't understand what was going on, what must it be like for women who are working in male-dominated workplaces or just regular workplaces? It can be really, really confronting. So it certainly opened my eyes to just some of the challenges that women with endo face. So now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage two women who have just done the most extraordinary things for awareness about endo in the endometriosis community. I think they're heroes. I think Syl and Les should walk around wearing capes with big E's on the back of them. Please welcome to the stage the founders of EndoActive, Lesley and Syl Freedman. Syl, I think you're going to speak first. Syl's first.
Hi everyone, we just want to play a short video to you first. Or not. I think it's the back one. Next.
Sharp stabbing pains on my left-hand side.
The sharp pains and this dull, heavy ache.
I was tried on morphine, endone, codeine.
Crying, I was screaming, I was like yelling.
Severe shooting pain in my leg.
Sometimes I just feel, I should just get up, jump off the balcony or something.
I'm on the ground screaming or crying, or I can't hop out of the shower by myself.
The pain is so intense that you'll fall unconscious.
My partner and I had sex, and I was up until about 3 a.m. So I can't even describe the pain.
I was on ketamine infusions for weeks at a time.
They had to put me in a wheelchair because I just couldn't move.
I had to get put into isolation because I was so crazy.
I wouldn't be able to move my legs because they'd go all jello-y.
It got to the point where I was begging doctors for a hysterectomy. I was done with the pain.
It's frustrating to see your child on the floor in that state, and you're giving them the Ponstan tablets or
Panadol Osteo.
Panadol Osteo. Yeah, Panadine Fort. I've given the child Panadine Fort, which is not great for bowels, but it takes the pain. And if she can get a few hours sleep, we're both happy with that. I'm just at my wit's end. I just don't know what else to do.
So, as I'm sure all of you can understand, the pain that all of these women are talking about is from endometriosis. describing what endo actually feels like to me has always been so difficult, and I was saying that to Mia just the other day. I still find it really hard to find the language to describe how endo makes you feel. It's not just a matter of listing through all the symptoms, the heavy fatigue, the digestive disorders, the food intolerances, the bloating, the chronic UTIs, just all these different things. It's like, it's so much more than that. And the confusion that we face, and as Mia touched on, if you don't really know what's going on, you don't have an understanding of what is happening to your body, then we lack the language to actually be able to describe to other people and alert them that there's a problem. So when I am stuck for words, I usually reach out to our EndoActive Facebook community, who are incredibly responsive, and I ask them to help me put into words what endo feels like to them. And the girls said things like, it makes me feel incomplete, broken, like my body is my worst enemy, like I'm slowly going insane, like I can't reach my full potential, and like I'm a failure as a woman. And I find that really hard to read, because it is exactly how we feel, and yet why should we feel this way? I remember when I first got my period when I was 11 years old, that's when it was excruciating from day one. And I remember obviously going to my mum as soon as that happened and telling her that I was in excruciating pain and that I didn't really want to go to school. And I know you feel terrible about this now, but at the time she told me that, you know, I got really painful periods too, and I'm sorry, but that's just what we're going to have to deal with. That's what we have to deal with as women. I got painful periods, you do too, and that's it. And that is through no fault of your own at all. That's what we're taught as girls from such a young age. And it's not okay that from so early on we're teaching girls that pain is part of being a woman. And I think that if I could change anything, that would be it. That the normalisation of women's pain is unhelpful, because if we're taught that pain is normal, then how are we supposed to know when we start feeling pain at any age, whether it's in primary school or high school, that that's worthwhile enough for us to go to the doctor and say that there's something wrong? And the other problem with the normalisation of women's pain is that by the time we do get to the doctor, as so many girls on EndoActive have expressed, we're told that pain is normal, or period pain can't be that bad, or to just go home, take a Panadol and get on with it. So as I was getting older, the symptoms that I was experiencing were getting a lot worse. As I was in high school, I would often have to leave school early and get mum to pick me up and take me home because my period pain was so incredible. And then beyond that, I started to become in chronic pelvic pain every day. Chronic UTIs, chronic sinusitis, chronic migraines, just everything. I was barely making it to uni in the end, and as Mia said, barely making it to work and losing jobs that I loved. So by the time I got diagnosed, I was 21 years old, so living with the symptoms for 10 years. And all of a sudden being told you might have endometriosis and you're going to need to have a surgery, which was a total shock. And I think the worst part was that there was a total lack of information. There was no point where we were given like the beautiful boxes that you get, say, when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, or detailed pamphlets if you have diabetes or asthma. So we really didn't know what to do, and that confusion lasted for another 20 months before suddenly I was getting my second surgery for endometriosis. And we realised 20 months on, we still didn't know anything about this disease, which I think is unacceptable, and we should absolutely be given information not just when you're diagnosed, but at the school age. So that's when we, oh, hang on, here we go. So second surgery, that's how I was feeling. And yeah, we still had no information and I was sick as a dog. So that's when Lesley started to really take it into her own hands and start doing her own research. And I needed her to because I was too sick. So she became my health advocate. And she'll talk to you more about the types of things that she found out. But I think that was a real breakthrough. Learning how to self-manage your disease and learning as much as you can, being adamant about gathering as much evidence-based information as you possibly can as a patient is really, really important. So for the last 20 or so months, I've actually been pain-free, which has felt fantastic, but I will never forget what living with chronic pelvic pain or chronic pain in general feels like. I will never forget that, and that's why I'm so passionate about remaining a patient advocate for girls with endo. And I think education is absolutely essential, so if we can start to educate girls from a young age, tell them what endo is and the symptoms to look out for, then that would be hugely beneficial. I think that endo must be taken seriously and women's pain must be taken seriously. We cannot keep having this women being turned away from emergency or told to go and have a baby or see a psychiatrist or go and take a Panadol. It's just not okay. My message to patients with endo, women here in the audience tonight, is to absolutely take control. So you know, we often struggle with, you have the surgery, you're still not feeling better, you're seeing multiple specialists all year round. Take your health into your own hands, learn as much as you possibly can, understand about self-management and the things that you can do at home yourself, and it will really help with your mental health, and I think you'll start to feel empowered and energised. And also, of course, to play your part in raising awareness, because if the people at the top aren't going to be talking about endo, then it's up to us. So as patients, just be as loud as you can and use your voice. Thank you.
As you've heard, Syl and I have been on an amazing journey since she was first diagnosed with endo. Unfortunately, it was her that suffered the pain and the complete disruption to her life and study, but she's also bravely shared her experience to help other people when they're trying to explain their own symptoms. Worst thing I had to deal with was the absolute embarrassment of my complete ignorance of this horrible disease. I'd never heard of it, and why hadn't I noticed the abnormal symptoms that Syl had obviously been suffering for years? When the most I actually did for that was I gave her a period party. I thought, that's going to be my... Anyway, I felt like a bit of a dropkick as a mother. So I started reading everything I could find about endo and how it's treated. And that's how I heard about a drug called Visan, which can suppress the symptoms of endo, as other ones can, but that one was having good results. While Syl was slowly and painfully recovering from her second lap, I was on the phone to Bayer, trying to persuade them to put Visan on the Australian market. They said we should write a letter and gather some signatures in support of it. So my husband Rod, who's over there, and I, we asked our friends to help, and we thought we were doing quite well. We got at least 25 people to send emails to Bayer. And when Sylvia found out what we were up to, she was impressed. I mean, 5 minutes ago, she said she had hundreds of friends on Facebook who'd signed a petition for us, so what on earth were we doing writing letters? So we took her advice, we went online and we petitioned Bayer for Visan. We were babes in the wood, honestly. We were totally unprepared for the tens of thousands of people who signed that petition in a matter of weeks. It was our first experience using social media for activism, and the power of Facebook and change.org just blew us away. Little did we know that it would change our lives probably forever. I'm sure by now most of you will have signed a petition, at least one online petition for your favourite cause, if it's animals or whatever. Did you know that you have an opportunity to leave a comment on those petitions, as well as your signature? Well, there were over 19,000 comments on our petition from women and their families suffering endometriosis, expressing their pain and despair and begging for help. And Syl and I read just about every one of them as they came in. After a while, they were coming in so quickly we couldn't actually get through them in one night, but we have read them since. And that's when it dawned on us that our petition was not about getting a drug from Bayer. Our petition was about raising awareness of a disease that no one likes to mention, a disease that very rarely makes the headlines, even though it affects the lives of hundreds of thousands of girls and women in Australia. We got 74,500 signatures in about 6 weeks, and that's why we started EndoActive. Bayer phoned us with the amazing news. Thanks to the petition, Bizarre was released in Australia. We'd already moved way beyond that, honestly. We were already planning our first endometriosis conference for patients and healthcare professionals. And honestly, we'd never done anything like that before. That's probably why we did it so easily. We just thought, well, it can't be that hard. Susan was our first keynote speaker, and Mia was a special guest presenter. In my other life, not that I have much of it these days, I'm a video director. Rod and I work together making documentaries, health and education films. So the point of the conference was we were going to film it and produce shared perspectives on endometriosis, an award-winning educational resource for people like us, parents and patients and their carers. We have copies of this DVD outside, and it also streams from our website. Later this year, probably about September, we'll hold our second conference. If you want to be there, watch us on Facebook, we'll be announcing it. I want to thank Mia for her fantastic help in raising awareness of endo on Mamamia. It makes a huge difference. Mamamia has hundreds of thousands, how many? Millions of women watching it. So when something goes up on Mamamia, people hear about it, and that makes an enormous impact. And also want to thank Quendo, the Queensland Endometriosis Association, for their years of unrelenting support for women with endo in Queensland, and thanks, Jude, for all your wise advice to us. And of course, thanks, Grant Montgomery. Honestly, where would we be without the science behind this? Because without the science, we aren't going to understand, even begin to understand, how does it start, why does it start, and how can we best treat it? Now we're going to let the girls have the last word.
The thing that I really wish for is a life without fear of pain, without suddenly being disabled.
Have a career where I don't have to call in sick every month. I really want to go back to work.
Part of me wishes for a cure for endo, and the other part of me wishes for awareness of endo starting at the school age.
I wish for all of this to go away and I never had any of this problems, because then I could be able to go to school and spend time with my friends.
I just wish people knew about endo before you told them about it.
I'd like endometriosis to be taken more seriously.
To raise awareness for this.
You gave us the confidence to talk to people about it. Before we were talking only to our friends, but now we make it a point that we talk to our family members, everyone.
Millions of pamphlets for smoking and cancer and stuff, but there's nothing on menstruation or endometriosis.
You know, it took me 7 years to see a specialist, so if we can shorten that at all, I think that would be a really good positive.
For doctors to recognise this disease, to take it seriously, and to get help sooner.
For 2 years, I was lost. I had no one to help me with this or help us with this. But EndoActive Australia and New Zealand has given us that confidence to just talk to people. Thanks to you.
As you can see from that video, endo is not something that discriminates. It's all ages, all nationalities. It's really, really such a pernicious condition that can strike anyone. I got so excited about introducing Syl and Les that I forgot that maybe I'd forgot to read their actual proper intros. So even though they've already spoken, I think it's very important that I tell you. Sylvia is the co-founder of EndoActive, a health promotion charity providing information, awareness and advocacy for women and girls with endometriosis. Endo is a chronic incurable disease that affects 1 in 10 women, often causing pain and infertility. And being a patient advocate, as well as a sufferer, Syl is passionate about empowering patients to become active participants in their own healthcare and promoting self-efficacy. Through the power of social media, Syl has created an online community of over 8,700 people with a reach of up to 65,000 on Facebook. She has a Master's in Health Communication and is currently studying a Master of Philosophy Medicine at the University of Sydney. And her research project is based on the endometriosis patient experience. Syl's mother, Lesley Freedman, is the co-founder of EndoActive and has an MA in writing for media and a postgrad diploma in social health. She was a director at ABC TV in Sydney for 12 years before starting Change Focus Media with her husband Rod. For Change Focus, she produces and directs health and education video resources and documentaries. Lesley was a single parent for 7 years and has also been a voluntary advocate for an intellectually disabled person for the last 18 years. She is passionate about social justice, equal opportunity for women and helping to improve the lives of women and girls with endo. Now, at Mamma Mia, our core purpose as a business and as a company is to make the world a better place for women and girls. And Sylvia and Lesley have lived that in their work around endometriosis. I've seen firsthand the amount of time, the amount of passion, the amount of energy, the amount of devotion they put in, all completely off their own bat. EndoActive receives no government grants or funding, and you couldn't even measure the hours that they put in. So I think that we all owe them a big debt of gratitude. What struck me most about that video that you showed was the expression on that mother's face when that young girl was talking. And, you know, as a mother myself, it just broke my heart. And it's an expression I've seen on your face, Les, many, many times, when you just wish that you could take the burden that your child is suffering onto yourself. And the husband of that woman at the end as well. I think that's there's so many people in this room who are here as supporters, and they are also heroes in this story. Our next speaker is Professor Grant Montgomery, who has been named as one of the world's most influential scientific minds by Thomson Reuters. Professor Montgomery has made substantial contributions to the global effort to uncovering genetic risk factors for diseases such as endometriosis. Oh, Susan. I told you I was a little bit overexcited. We'll get to Grant in a minute. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure intro. Who will she introduce next? Dr. Susan Evans is a gynaecologist, laparoscopic surgeon and specialist pain medicine physician from Adelaide, Australia. She is author of the book Endometriosis and Pelvic Pain, director of the Pelvic Pain Foundation of Australia and member of the advisory board of the Robinson Research Institute. Susan has contributed widely to education on pelvic pain in Australia in everything from medical journals to Cosmopolitan, radio and television. Dr. Evans is currently researching the causes of severe period pain in young women, and we are very much looking forward to what she's going to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. Done perfectly. I love this picture. I use it quite a lot. And I love it so much because they're such gorgeous children. And all of us would want those children to grow up with their opportunities for doing the best with life that they make it. Their opportunities not hampered by illness or misfortune. But it's not fair between these two children. They're both lovely, but she has a 1 in 10 chance of developing endometriosis. It won't be anything that she does wrong, bad habits, bad upbringing, bad anything. It'll be one of those things that happens. And it could be from her first period that she goes from being an otherwise perfectly healthy girl to someone who has a problem. But we know for a fact that when she does have that problem, that generally she won't find the care that she needs. She won't find the understanding, the information, the comprehensive care for her mix of symptoms that we would all expect from any other medical condition. Endometriosis lives in an environment that very few other areas of medicine would tolerate. The lack of research, the lack of understanding, the lack of education. It's quite outstanding how far it has to go. One of the things that she might turn up with first is period pain. And that is undoubtedly the biggest symptom that women with endometriosis have. But it's by no means the only one. And you think to yourself, why is it that it's so hard for that girl that was healthy and then became a teen with a problem she found so difficult to share and found so embarrassing in those awkward teen years that all of us went through, probably many of us sometimes without the same problems that she might have. Why is it that she falls between the cracks and doesn't get the care that she needs? Well, it's because endometriosis has a mix of things. It's not just abnormalities you can see at a laparoscopy if you put a telescope in her tummy and have a look around. It's a whole range of conditions that are common in these people that have that condition called endometriosis. And some of the pains and symptoms that she has, you can see at a laparoscopy, on a scan, with blood tests and things, but many of them you can't. And unfortunately, unlike other pain conditions, where it is understood that there'll be pain you can see and pain you can't see, the bar is held very high for women. Basically, you can see something at a laparoscopy and supposedly fix it, or she's a bit crazy really, or she's imagining it, or there's something weak or vulnerable or crazy about her, which means that all her pain doesn't really matter or can't really be explained or taken seriously. It's not at all fair. If someone has migraines, no one expects to see abnormalities in their brain. They accept it's a pain that you can't see. If people have a back condition or back pain, you can't always see something. Everybody understands that. But in women, it's you see something at a laparoscopy, or really, it's all a bit dodgy and not very important. So the way I actually explain what happens to women with endometriosis is often using this slide and this diagram. So she probably started off as a healthy child, and then the endometriosis or the period pain started in the pelvis there. So that could be, her uterus or developing areas of endometriosis. And that's when she might start with the period pain. But so commonly, other organs will want to get in the picture and get involved as well. So the pelvis is a busy place. There's the bowels where you can get intolerance or foods and an irritable bowel. There's the bladder where you can get bladder pain symptoms of going to the toilet a lot, getting up at night, or having urgency. There can sometimes be vulval skin problems, but there's a mix of different problems from organs in the pelvis. The next thing that happens, sometimes after a short time, sometimes after a long time, is that the muscles in the pelvis will start to get involved as well. There'll be that pelvic muscle reaction to pain. And that isn't anything you see at a laparoscopy or see on scans or blood tests. So her pelvic floor muscles might get tight and painful, make sex pretty uncomfortable, even putting in tampons, having smear tests, or even just an achy, spasmy, crampy type feel up the vagina or up the bowel there. They're not symptoms that are really easy to discuss around the table at dinner time with friends and family. It's sort of not really, they just sort of double over a bit and want to bend forward and find it a bit hard to walk or get the back pain and stuff. But, no one likes to talk about stabbing pains up the vagina. That's straight to the loony bin. They just sort of, and if you listen to the women in that video at the beginning, a lot of them were talking about stabbing pains, weren't they? Yeah, that's the muscle spasms. That's the cramp on the inside of their pelvis. And of course, there are other muscles that can be involved too. There's obturator internus on the inside of the hips. And that one is the one where they say, it happened and I was just in a spasm and I couldn't move. I couldn't walk properly. Or I had pain down the front of my legs or in my back. That's the spasm from the muscles reacting to a pain in the pelvis. That often goes on for a long time before it's diagnosed. Then sometime along the way, the nerve pathways, the central sensitization process gets involved. And that's where the body gets sensitized. That's when she starts to really, unfortunately, doubt her own abilities, and others think she might be a bit crazy because she starts to feel fatigued all the time, or have anxiety or low mood or nausea or dizziness, poor sleep, fatigue. And they are what pain specialists like myself would really call autonomic sensitization. It's sensitization of the nervous system that involves all those systems. You certainly won't see that at a laparoscopy, and you won't see it on blood tests or a scan, but it's very real. Pain becomes a pain on most days, and I'm really worn down type system. And then the bottom picture is how it is for a lot of women who've grown up with pain. Growing up is always difficult, and the teen years are years when our brains are developing all their connections and the way they work, where we're trying to sort ourselves up in the context of relationships and education and our own place in the world. It's a hard time to grow up with pain. I haven't got time to go through the management of all of those things, but just so that you know, I have written a whole book for women about it. And you can get a paperback or an ebook version from the Pelvic Pain Foundation website. Now, this one is a picture from laparoscopies. And I've got, so some of you, many of you will have seen photographs from laparoscopies if you've had them, but I just want to show you a couple of things. Whenever you look at the photographs from a laparoscopy, remember that it's as if you are looking through your own belly button down into your pelvis towards the feet. That's how it helps you get orientated. So this thing up here is half a uterus, sitting up there, nice and pink, lovely. This is a white ovary here, fallopian tube. That's another white ovary under that fallopian tube. This area in here is called the pouch of Douglas. Who's ever heard of a pouch of Douglas? And the question is, so who was Douglas? And what was he doing in the pouch anyway? So Douglas, James Douglas, was physician to the Queen in the 1700s. So that's where he got his fame. He described the lowest area in the pelvis. And it's all pretty cosy in there because this is the bowel going down here and the rectum down there, top of the vagina is on the other side here, and bladder will be on the other side up there. Now, the endo is this little dark bit here, but it's also all the white stuff around it. So it's this area here. Wouldn't ever show on a scan. There's another little piece over here. But generally her pelvis is pretty good. The ovaries are lovely. She'll probably have 15 babies if she tries to. So this basically, yes, she's got endo, but it's not actually that bad from an endo-looking perspective. This is the commonest type of endo, not actually that many lesions, which is the name for these things. Look at this one though. So if you can notice the difference, that's the uterus at the back there. That's her left ovary. Big, huh? It's got two big endometriomas in it, chocolate cysts full of endometriosis. And this one has two tucked underneath here. And this bowel is stuck to everything, everything's stuck together. No clear space here to have a look and things. So this is very severe endometriosis. But who has more pain? You can't tell. There is no correlation between the amount of endometriosis and the amount of pain. So if you've woken up from a laparoscopy and they've said, oh yes, we found a bit of endo, not too bad, everything's mostly okay, and you've thought, but I've got so much pain, how come you didn't find more? Where's the rest? Haven't you looked hard enough? There's no correlation between the amount of endo and the amount of pain. So it doesn't mean you haven't got pain, it's just that structurally your pelvis is not too bad. This does have fertility issues. So the worse the endo, the bigger the potential issues with fertility, but it doesn't matter for the pain. The pain can be bad with this one. This woman actually had no pain. came to see me because she wasn't getting pregnant, and we found a few things on a scan. Now, but I'd like to actually talk about the tale of two women, because these women are treated differently in our society. This one will wake up and she'll be told, look, most things were okay, there was a bit of endo and we've treated that. And she will feel belittled, really. Not that anyone wants her to feel that way, but she'll think, but I had so much pain. What does my pain mean? Am I going crazy? Is it all in my head? People will think that she should be better now, when actually there's so many causes of pain you can't see. So she will be clinging to every bit of endometriosis there because she wants it to be known that she has real pain. Of course she has real pain. She's got loads of pain. She's got more pain than this lady. But it's so into, if you don't see a lot, it can't be that bad, which is not right. This woman will wake up with, okay, you've got big endo. She'll get a lot more sympathy, a lot more attention, but that doesn't necessarily go with her pain. So one of the things I want people to take away is there's a lot of pain you can't see in people with endometriosis. So, and remember that our culture still has ingrained attitudes to women and women's troubles. So we might think that these things are things from the past, but they're not really. When women present with symptoms that can't be seen, it's often perceived that it's in their head. No one really has to say that for women to think that others feel it. And that concept that actually comes from Freud a long time ago, that somehow there's something sexual and uncomfortable in this, is still pervasive in some people's thoughts. And that it sometimes makes people reliable, which when they have a lot of pain can be. But if we think about all of this, would many people tell if they had women's troubles? And that's why so few people understand about these things. So, how can you make a difference? Well, there's a role for everybody. And I suggest that you all make a really big noise. Not necessarily right now, but I'd like you to make a really big noise of support and appreciation to those health practitioners who may not be perfect, but are doing their best to listen to you and learn more in this area. Because it is complex for them as well. And those that are working in this area do need our support and encouragement and appreciation. I'd like you to make a really big noise of how can I possibly help to organisations like EndoActive, Endo, Endometriosis Australia and Pelvic Pain Foundation, because without your help, they're just not going to accomplish nearly as much. And I'd like you to make a really big noise talking to politicians and institutions and saying, this is a big issue for 1 in 10 young women. It's an economic issue, it's a workplace issue, it's an educational issue, and it's a women's quality of life issue for them and all their family and friends. So make a big noise, visit us at pelvicpain.org.au, and thank you very much.
You know, Sue, that was fantastic. I interviewed Syl for the podcast that I do called No Filter, and I was so inspired by what she said and what you said about this idea of making a big noise. We decided after my conversation with Syl to do an EndoActive week on Mamma Mia. So we're going to do a whole week of content, of videos, of women's stories, of information, and really help get the word out, because this idea of secrecy, like Les, I thought I was pretty evolved and I knew a lot, and I had sort of knew a little bit about endometriosis, but when Syl said that she had it, I was just like, oh yeah, it just means you got sort of bad period pain, doesn't it? You know, like stop whinging. And I thought it was so fascinating what you said also about the pain, because, you know, despite my jokes earlier about millennials, as someone who doesn't have period pain, when your daughter expresses that she does, or your friend, particularly your daughter, because it's a different generation, you can just kind of be a little bit, just harden up, because you can't see it. So thank you so much. I think that was just absolutely fascinating. We'll talk more about that in the panel. Our next speaker is Dr. Susan Evans. No, just kidding. Just joshing, just lightening up the mood. after we've seen some insides of some ladies. Grant, it's your turn. You get your intro twice because you're special. And you're our only man on the panel. Still named as one of the world's most influential scientific minds by Thomson Reuters, Professor Montgomery has made substantial contributions to the global effort to uncovering genetic risk factors for diseases such as endometriosis. He's led an international consortium which carried out the largest study on endo to date. His research is currently focused on the huge task of identifying genes which increase a woman's risk for endometriosis, which will hopefully lead to better methods for treatment and diagnosis. Please come to the stage.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to you about our program using genetics to try to really understand some of the causes of endometriosis. I call it a bit the long game, but the structure of the talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about risk factors and why genetics, something about our progress in mapping the genomic regions, and then our current next steps of that, which is trying to identify the genes themselves, and finally, very briefly, some future questions and challenges. So, endometriosis is a complex disease, and what I mean by that is that it's influenced by both genes and environment. And when we think about environment, we think about the things like smoking and alcohol and diet and those kinds of things. But you can see from the pie chart that it's about evenly balanced. So about half of the risk we think is due to genetic risk factors and the other half is due to environmental factors. And it's actually been quite difficult to identify the individual environmental factors. And so for that reason, most of my work has been on trying to use genetics to actually get at the causes. But what we know is that the individual risks are the combined effects of small differences, small genetic factors and small effects of environment. And that really sums it up. So there's not one cause, if you like. It's made up of multiple things. So anyway, we've used genetics to try to get at this problem. And that's not a trivial task either, because we know that the genomes are complicated. We all have 22 pairs of chromosomes plus the sex chromosomes. Well, at least I have a Y one. But there's women have a pair of X's, of course, and inherit one copy from our mother and one copy from our father. And if we sort of tease out the chromosomes at their core, there's a long strand of DNA. And on that DNA is a sequence, and the sequence is unique to every individual. But the bits that we have in common are the bits that code for the genes that function in the cells, and also the machinery that works in the cells to make sure that the right genes are turned on or turned off in the right cells at the right time, so that we develop to become adults. And when I talk about a genomic region, what I mean is a DNA that covers probably anywhere between 10 and 20 genes, but there are 20,000 genes in the genome to look through, and the sequence is made up of 3 billion base pairs. So trying to find the 100 particular changes, single letter changes, that really are the risk factors that contribute to endometriosis is not a trivial exercise. However, we've been making quite a lot of progress, and the real breakthrough came really about 10 years ago with our ability, with a lot of technological advances that really allowed us to look at 1 million sites across a genome in multiple people at the same time. And so that technology is pretty amazing, and it's been used pretty widely. And the first, we call these genome-wide association studies, and the first of these was published in 2007. So fairly quickly thereafter, 3 years later, the first of these sort of studies was published by a Japanese group, and they, with the size of their study, they were able to find one region we were working in parallel with groups at Oxford and Harvard University at the time, and with another group of patients, and we published our results a year later, and we'd identified an additional 2, and I got in touch with the Japanese group, and we shared the data so that we could combine the data in a single analysis, which we then published in 2012, and then we'd found 7 regions. So I've just led the analysis for another study, big international study, 11 groups worldwide, where we've had 17,000 endometriosis patients and 190-odd thousand controls. So we've looked at studied the genomes of 200,000 people for this study, and at 8 million sites across the genome for each of those people. So some pretty big numbers and some big files to look through. And so we've now doubled the size of the regions, and we have 14 regions. And so the figure that you see is really a representation of that, and what is along the bottom is the results for an individual position on the genome, starting at chromosome 1 and walking right across the chromosomes, chromosome 22 with the X chromosome on the end. And on the sort of y-axis, on the vertical axis, is a measure of how confident we are that we have a marker that we think is associated or might be a cause for endometriosis. We call these Manhattan plots because we're just interested in the skyscrapers. And so basically, if you see the red line that's going across the middle, the stuff that's above the red line is the stuff that we have more confidence in. Okay, so you can see that there's a bunch of skyscrapers there that we do, that we know about, and some of them we've repeated from the earlier studies, so we've got really good confidence. So now what we need to do is to actually get down into the region itself, so, the local area. But then we have to actually find the right address so that we can knock on the door and actually speak to the culprit. And so that's really what we're trying to do next. Unfortunately, this is just really the first step. So finding the genome-wide association studies find us a region on the genome. What we'd really like to be doing, I'd love to be able to tell you, that we had new treatments. And so we'd all like to be doing the clinical trials and things at the end. But we have a bunch of steps to go through before we can get to that. And specifically, we need to identify the particular genes that are important. And so my group is also taking a kind of world-leading position in this. So we've just published the results for the first of these. And so that figure that you've seen before on the left-hand side, if you take that skyscraper on or the region around that skyscraper on the left-hand side there on chromosome 1, and you expand it out, and you can see actually from the top figure and the bottom figure that there's not just one marker, there's a bunch of markers around there that are really showing us that region is important, and underneath there's a bunch of genes. You can't read what the genes are, but that doesn't matter. I've circled 3 of them. The one that I circled in yellow, when we looked through the list, we thought that's really going to be it because it's a gene that's involved in the development of the uterus, so probably it was going to be important. But our results actually don't tell us that. We think that that's probably not involved. We think it's the other 2 that we've circled in red. And we have good data to suggest that these 2 genes, there are changes in these genes in the endometrium which might be important. So the next step is really, how do these genes affect endometriosis, and are they targets for new therapies? So there's still quite a lot of work just in that alone. So finally then, some current questions and future challenges. So the current questions, the top one. So as I've said, in each region, what are the specific genes that affect risk, and are they targets for new treatments? We've looked at 1, we've got 13 others to go, and we know that there's more to look for. So we're trying to develop faster methods to work through that, and Jenny, my postdoc who's here, is leading the charge on this. So in terms of future challenges, as Susan has mentioned, pain research I think is badly needed. It's not something that I've done a lot of work on because it's a really specialist area. But having recently moved to the Institute for Molecular Biosciences, there's a Centre for Pain Research there, And so we're talking with them to try to expand our work in pain research. And and Susan and we'll be talking with them tomorrow, so we're looking forward to that. So one of the other questions that I think is really important is it one disease or are there different forms of endometriosis? We know it presents differently. We know that, as Susan said, there's not a lot of correlation between pain and what you see in terms of the lesions. And we also know that in breast cancer, being able to identify the different subtypes and to be able to diagnose them appropriately has really helped in treatment, and that's true for lots of other cancers. And although endometriosis is not generally considered to be malignant, that the differences that it presents have some similarities to the differences that you see, and so that's an area that we really want to work on, and I know that other people around the world are beginning to take that on board and do some work on that. And finally, I've talked about environmental risk. It has been really difficult to identify the individual environmental factors, and there's lots of reasons for that, which I won't go into. But we've just received a big grant from the National Institutes of Health in the US, provided that they still keep sending grants out from the US. But it's another international consortium, and it has some of the usual suspects from the other ones that we work with. And what that grant specifically is to try to see if we can use genomics to get at the environmental factors. So that's it. And finally, I'd just like to thank lots of the people who are contributing to the work that we're doing and some of the things that I've talked about tonight. Thanks very much.
I'd like to invite all our speakers back onto the stage for our panel. Grant, Sue, Les and Syl. Please come back onto the stage, and if you can just attach those little lapel mics to your jackets. And we'll switch on your mics. Syl, I wanted to start with you. Apart from surgery and medication, what are some of the things that patients can do to manage endo themselves? And so I'm going to come to you on this same question after Syl.
I think some of the things that patients can do themselves is also self-management. There's a lot of different things that can fall into that. So for me, I learned, I started going to see an acupuncturist, and I think that was helping me get my pain levels down, but they were also teaching me a lot about changing the way that I was eating and the types of foods that I was eating and drinking as well. So, was that Siri?
Yeah, Siri. Siri's got some advice. Siri, what shall I do about my pelvic pain? She'd know.
So, learning more about the role that the gut plays and changing
You've changed your diet, haven't you?
Yeah, changing my diet a lot.
Has that made a difference?
Yeah, huge difference. Anti-inflammatory diet is something that I've sort of been following. So reducing inflammation in the body, seeing a pain psychologist, which was learning about how to manage chronic pain rather than like talking about feelings, which is like what I thought that I was going there for, but actually wasn't. Regular exercise, and of course, I think the best thing about EndoActive or having that start was because I wasn't working and I was on the couch and depressed and in pain and feeling really crap all the time. I then had something to look forward to and put all my energy into.
So distraction.
Yeah, a distraction, but also a sense of
purpose.
Sense of purpose, yeah. So having that back and kind of having a bit more of a spring in your step really helps with your mental health.
So what do you recommend to your patients? I suppose everyone's different.
I think that it's useful to think about the slide that I showed of the different aspects to pain and making a bit of a list of all the different symptoms that someone has. And it's unlikely that any one treatment will fix all of them. One of the useful things is to look back and think, what was the first pain problem? Now, for many of you, that will have been painful periods. So it is really important, if you can, to try and stop those periods or suppress them in some way. And there are now more and more ways of potentially doing that. But if you manage a lot of the secondary things, it's going to be harder to manage those if the thing that winds it up every month, like a bad period, is still happening every single month. So I'd look back at what was the first pain problem, the thing that started the pain, and work on that. We've got lots of information on the Pelvic Pain Foundation website or in the book about managing each individual different pain. I would also say that for many people, their worst pain is the pelvic muscle spasm. It doesn't get diagnosed, but it is often the worst pain and often the one that takes them to an emergency department when it's particularly bad.
What do you mean it doesn't get diagnosed?
Because you can't see it. Most doctors don't understand that it's actually happening. The muscles are inside and there are no tests for it. And normal examination often doesn't find it. It can do if it's pelvic floor, but it often doesn't find it if it's the muscles on the inside of the hip. So if you're getting stabbing pains, aching pains, pain on movement, back pain, there's usually a muscle component. And those ones, even though they make you want to rest and lie down, they will get worse with rest. Really important to keep moving. And that has to be paced, start small and do it regularly.
Like when you say keep moving during the pain?
Can do. It's very hard to keep moving when you've got the spasms. But it's actually for the people that say to me, it was really hard for me to get going or do those on the website and things. But when I did go for a walk, I actually felt better. So the paced thing, we're going to on the website soon have a graded exercise program to help people who've been less active get moving. I think
because it can be very debilitating.
Can be, but I think keeping moving if you can in a slow measured way and staying away from core exercise is often really helpful.
Staying away from core exercise, which you define as what? Like Pilates?
Pilates, planking, any of those things, you know.
Crunches.
Pole dancing, I don't know. All those.
What, like no sit-ups?
Sit-ups, bad.
We've got an excuse, finally. Off the hook.
You need a whole lot of movement away from the core, the sort of easy moving, the sort of Zumba, those sort of gentle type, keeping moving, exercise away from the core.
Les, in terms of what supporters and carers can do, I mean, it must be very, very difficult to love someone and see them suffering. What's your advice for how to be most useful?
Honestly, being their advocate, because it's not just the things that we've discussed tonight. There's that depression, there's a feeling of getting panic attacks, anxiety, not wanting to leave the house. I know you don't all have mums, but you do need somebody with you, a partner,
a friend, a sister.
Somebody to go to the doctor with you, because sometimes when you're going and you're in pain, you don't even hear what the doctor said. You can't even remember the questions that you wanted to ask until afterwards. And if they're on a 10-minute schedule, you know, you get home and you find you can't remember things. So Sylvie was terrific. She would let me go with her. I'd make notes. We'd discuss what we wanted to know before, and we could discuss it afterwards. But believing that your friend has pain is the first thing, and then coping with it together and learning to be a team with your medical team. The healthcare practitioners can help you. They just need to know the right information from you. So keeping track, something simple like, when do you get your pain? How often is it? Is it connected with your period or not? Even keeping a period diary. It sounds really silly and basic, but it's
There are
so
really good
important.
apps for that where you can do that.
And you can use the apps, really important. And then show it to the doctor, not just keep it to yourself, so that they might forget to say, is your pain actually something to do with the period or does it come mid-cycle? Those are the things that are really important for everybody to know.
And also to figure out, I think, yourself, is my pain happening when I've had no sleep the night before, or is it happening when I've accidentally skipped my pill 2 days ago, or skipped my probiotics, or and those are things that you can start to see for yourself. So
look for patterns.
Yeah, looking for patterns and correlations, obviously with your doctor as well. But then that's the thing about taking control of your own health, is if you start to track all that stuff and you can start to see things, then you realise you can change it. You don't need to necessarily go and see, like, I have to go to my specialist because I'm in pain again. Like, you can actually
start to figure things out yourself.
I did this and that, and I drank like 10 margaritas and then stayed up all night for 3 days. And then
Syl, you would never do that.
And then skipped a week of my pill, or I was eating chocolate. I was eating Macca's like for couple of weeks or something.
Well, that's not good.
She's never done that.
So it's like CSI Endo. You've got to do your own detective work. Grant, patients with endometriosis often have such different symptoms. Can genetic research help to explain why that is?
I think they can. I think that we need to do some different things than we've been doing and use some of the new technology that's available. So it presents very differently, I think. So I think there's lots of aspects to that. So one is Susan showed those different presentations with the different sorts of lesions. So, are they actually, is the cause exactly the same? There's probably some underlying causes that are similar, but there are probably differences as well. And so it's a question of finding some of those differences. And so beginning to look at it in the ways that cancer biology is looking at it, but through a different lens. I think that's one way. And I think that the other way is trying to understand the relationship between, or lack of relationship between, pain symptoms and presentations of the disease itself. And I think there's a lot that we can now do. I mean, one of the things that I'd be interested in is whether apps and things, so recording stuff in real time will give us a much better picture of the longitudinal stuff that we can then start to look and see whether, because a lot of what we do is a snapshot at one particular time, and that, I think there's a lot more to learn. So I think there's many things that we can do, and different aspects of trying to think about it. Is it one disease, or is it different but similar disease, or subtypes of disease?
Asking you to look into your crystal ball into the future, is the end game trying to come up with a diagnostic test that will determine whether someone's predisposed to it and likely to develop it, or is it more on understanding the issue for people who already have it and trying to work out treatments and cures?
So the individual effects are quite small. And so coming up with a predictive test is not going to be simple. It's not like cystic fibrosis or something like that.
Or the BRCA test or something like that.
But people are working on better ways of prediction. And I think if, it may be possible in the future, particularly if we understood some of the environmental factors and we could include those in prediction.
When you say environmental factors, what do you mean by that?
Whatever that 50% is, basically.
Yeah, right.
And so, I mean, there's literature out there. I mean, there's some suggestion, for example, of environmental estrogens may have some role, and there are people looking at that. And I think that
dioxins.
Yes, that's the other thing. And but the jury's completely out on that, in my view. But we need to do more research. But if we could understand that and do something about that as well. But if there are other environmental causes which may be more to do with lifestyle things that we could include, or life history issues.
Sue?
I think there's lots of potential times when we could intervene to make a difference here. The wonderful thing would be if there was a test even before periods that started alerting people to the fact that this girl might end up having problems. To me, that's a little way down the track. The next opportunity is that if she does turn up, like Syl did, with bad periods, that this is recognised early and appropriate intervention started. We're actually doing our first pilot program in 10 schools in South Australia this year, bringing an education program, just a health thing, to help teenagers recognise if their periods are normal and whether or not they need to be talking to their families about looking for health. So that sort of early intervention there. I think a test for those ones as to who might have endo and who mightn't, to guide whether or not they need things like laparoscopies, or whether they are somebody that will potentially, things might settle down. There's lots of points along the way, both research in a lab perspective and research in an educational and public health perspective that could make an enormous difference.
So what are the red flags? Because, for example, as I said, I'm an employer, we employ a lot of women. There are a couple of them who have to have days off work because of period pain.
I don't think they should be doing that.
Is
Not
that a red
run
flag?
Yeah, I think the easy way to pick up who's got a problem is anyone who's got pain for more than 1 to 2 days that isn't easily managed with either a normal contraceptive, pill, or an anti-inflammatory medication. And that will actually help differentiate not whether they've got big disease, little disease or something, but someone who has a problem that deserves care and assessment and help. And we know that in Australia, 1 in 5 teenage girls has seriously distressing period pain, sufficient for her to have missed school at times. Can you think of many other health conditions in the whole of Australia that affect 1 in 5 young women? Endo is the biggest, endo and period pain is the biggest of the big public health for young women issues. It beats everything. All the stuff that gets far more attention, endo beats it, but it gets so little.
And are your periods likely to have any correlation to your mum's? So, you know, if I don't get painful periods, can I assume that my daughter probably won't? I mean, obviously not, because look at you two. But how do you know as a mother when your child's just being a malingerer or whether there's...
That's right, that's right.
Don't you wish you were my daughter?
You know, I think that rule of periods should be easily managed with fairly simple things. So some women, even if some girls might have really bad period pain for a few hours or something, but they take a naprogesic and then they look all right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they can take a naprogesic and they quite possibly will be all right and quite possibly will grow out of it. But pain for more than a day or two that isn't easily managed, to me that's just an easy to use screening thing. And the women here, they will know that they didn't fit that criteria.
Les, you still was saying that she took 10 years to be diagnosed.
That's
and
common.
I remember her period party very well. How long did it take you to realise that there was a problem?
Well, you see, I just thought there was something wrong with her bladder. And I thought there's something
That's
little...
how you got diagnosed.
Yeah, there's some little thing that needs to happen here. I wasn't quite sure what, but it never occurred to me. Well, I'd never heard of endometriosis either, but I didn't think it was anything to do with the period. So I actually took her to the gynaecologist. Finally, Syl said she'd come. It had been 2 years I'd been saying, Syl, I think you need to see a gynaecologist or someone about this little problem.
Because I was having light bladder leakage, that's what...
But so you didn't have bad period pain?
I did, but weirdly, like I was having all the symptoms that we've talked about all night, but because I'd gotten used to them, well, they were getting worse, but because you're under the impression that it's somewhat normal or you think it's so weird and so random and you're sick with something different every day, that you kind of feel like a bit of a hypochondriac, so keep quiet. But this one problem that I had mentioned to you about...
She said, I laughed till I wet myself. And I said, hang on, that's not right.
Welcome to our lives as mothers.
She said, everybody does.
No.
It's a
I
joke.
said, isn't that where the expression comes from?
Not after you, not before you have children, you're not.
19, no. So we finally went to the gynaecologist, and we were lucky because he just did
he asked the right questions. Obviously, asking the right types of questions about history with periods and period pain and that type of thing, and he was the one that pieced it all together, and we were not expecting that.
Totally, we were in shock.
And, you know, please know that I'm playing devil's advocate here. Obviously I'm the first one to rush my daughter off to the doctor, and everyone in my family, and indeed myself. But I think that all I mean is that as someone who is very literate about women's health, who's worked in women's media and written a million women's health articles over my lifetime, and you too, Les, like you're the biggest feminist, the biggest lady. I'm surprised you don't have a uterus necklace. She's that kind of person. In fact, I'm sure you do somewhere. But even people like us who are so literate, so open, we both had no idea and are both so naive and ignorant. I'm still ignorant about so much of it. I've learnt so much tonight, I can't even tell you.
Do you know the phrase? Silent epidemic.
Silent epidemic, and it really is. And what you say about not being able to see the pain and not being able to correlate the physical appearance of something, is extraordinary.
Not being able to describe it. I mean, the video that we made with the girls talking, we had not met those women at all. They were all quite young. We just put a call out on Facebook, who's going to be in Noosa or Brisbane. or wherever we were going to be, we're filming. And so they put themselves up for it. And I asked the same question of each. So that description of the pain was amazing to us. And it actually brings us to tears when we watch that, as I'm sure you felt. And I'm sure with women with endo, you can actually get the pains just watching that. Other people describing how it feels. I know Syl feels like that.
Les, if you had a magic wand and you wanted to change one thing about the understanding and the world of endo from the outside, what would you do? What would you say?
I think it starts with menstruation. I mean, Grant will say, because he can see all those things, those genomes, it starts a lot earlier than that. But for most of us, talk about menstruation, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
As feminists, we didn't. We were much more interested in free love and the pill and all of that stuff. We forgot that actually menstruation is the point. Why are we so embarrassed to discuss it? It's ridiculous.
True.
So talk about menstruation with your nieces, with your neighbours, with
your sons.
Yes,
my son says
always.
that, I once said to him that my objective as a feminist raising him was that he could go and buy me tampons in a chemist if I needed him to. And he can now, he's 19. And I like to think that but it's true, talk about it with your daughters, but also talk about it with your sons.
Yeah.
That's really important too. We have run out of time, unfortunately. What an amazing discussion. I'm just feel so privileged and honoured to be amongst you guys tonight and to listen to these phenomenal talks from Grant Montgomery, Susan Evans, Lesley and Syl Freedman. Please thank all our speakers tonight.
My policy is you don't.
Now, endometriosis research is largely underfunded compared to other diseases. As you say, Susan, it is a silent epidemic. And other diseases with high healthcare burdens are much, much better funded. So if you would like to support endometriosis research or find out more about Professor Grant Montgomery's research, you can have a chat to Grant after the event, or you can visit imb.uq.edu. There's a lot of letters here, but I'm going to read them slowly. Oh, look, they're there. imb.uq.edu.au/endo. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and please visit the EndoActive Facebook page as well and join them. Thank you.